made a video on a power distribution module so I could power accessories on a motorbike, and that was on my Triumph Tiger. But on this Honda, I just want to power one accessory, well, a pair of small LEDs anyway. So I don't want to go to all the trouble of a power distribution module just for one set of accessories. This is a bike I'm not going to put much on. It has a lead for an Optimate, or an Oxford actually, optimizer. But I do want some small LEDs just to put on the front of the engine bars. And I don't want to go to the expense of a power distribution module. I really don't need it. So what do you do if you just have one accessory, one electrical accessory? What you can do is just buy yourself a 4-pin relay from your local automotive shop. A 4-pin relay. Make sure to get one though that says it has a diode included in it. And the diode will be built in inside, and I'll go through why the diode's important later. And then I'll just get a bit of cable, wire up through that relay to my lights. And I'll go through now why I'm using a relay and what are the benefits of doing that and why I'm doing that. So what can we do? How are we going to wire these lights? Well, I could just take an inline fuse, connect a ring terminal on that, stick it on the battery, positive connection, stick a switch in there somewhere. That switch could be just off that lead there under the seat maybe, or I could run that cable all the way up to the handlebars, and then from that switch to my pair of LED lights wired in parallel, and then the negative coming back all the way back to the battery. The only trouble there is, look, I've got to remember to switch them off. If I leave the bike, I might accidentally leave my lights on. So it's not a great solution. And if these loads were any higher, if these were halogen bulbs or something like that, I'd be taking a fair old current through all that cabling. We will probably want to try and avoid that. For a start, I don't need to bring this negative all the way back to the battery. You know, sometimes you can find on a bike a whole bunch of earths or grounds, if you like, to the frame underneath the petrol tank or somewhere like that, where you see a whole lot of cables together. That's them all going back through the frame to the negative terminal on the battery. So I could find somewhere like that, if there's somewhere like that on my bike, and so that's one cable I've shortened. That's a small improvement, but we can go further again. The next step is to actually bring a relay into the circuit, and that's the one I showed you at the start of this video. So I have a 4-pin relay here, and I still have my fuse connection to the positive connection of the battery terminal, and I have that going into terminal 30 of that relay, and that power there gets switched to terminal 87 and powers up my lights. I still need something to trigger that relay, switch that relay on. So I have at point 85 my negative from that relay going back to the negative on the battery, and I have my positive switched on ignition from the bike. Now this is where you have to do a little bit of looking around your forums or somewhere like that. Find somewhere that's only live when the ignition is switched on and it's free to use. So on bikes with CAN bus, you've got to be really careful. You don't want to tap into the CAN bus wiring at all. So check out the forums of bikes with CAN buses for safe 12 volt on ignition cabling or circuits you can tap into or use. In this instance, on my CB1100 here as well, I have a negative right next to it. So that's great. I can lose my connection back to the battery and just have the pair of them going through this loom. So my relay is going to be switched from this pre-wired cabling that's on my bike. On older bikes, a lot of people used to use, say, something like the tail light, and when you put the lights on, your lighting circuit was positive, and that would trigger your relay. You'd tap into there with a scotch clip or something like that. But most bikes have some sort of tap off point. Well, mine does here anyway. My last 2 bikes do. So see if you can find one of those with a relay. And last but one, what you could do is still have that handlebar switch, or maybe still just leave that switch under the seat, and in that positive switch that triggers that relay, you could put in a switch there so you can switch those lights off, so you have the option to switch the lights off even when the ignition is on. If you think you were going to use them all the time, like I'm going to be, I'm not going to bother with that switch. But if I wanted one, I'd probably leave it under the seat, and rather than wire up all the way up to the handlebars and back just for the option of switching those lights off, and tend to leave those lights on all the time. So it's not necessary to have one. But if you want one, if you want the option to switch them off and you think it might be only occasional, save yourself all that wiring up to the handlebars and just have it locally with that relay under the seat. So look where we've ended up. We've virtually copied a power distribution module. The only difference is the relay is built into the power distribution module. You can see it inside that square there. And we have multiple fused outlets and one main fuse inlet. So we've just recreated a power distribution module, but we only have one circuit in it. That's all we've done. You'd go one stage further, I guess, and do this. Because a lot of the power distribution modules have a common rail, I think I'd just take my negatives back to my common negative rail in my power distribution module. Look, that's not what I'm doing here. I'm just showing it for completeness, how we've kind of copied a power distribution module, but just a single circuit version. I did mention I'd talk about the diode. Look, that's just really important, especially on CAN bus systems. When the relay on the low current side of this relay, the coil that triggers the relay in and out, when that disengages, it actually sends a shock, a spike, a voltage spike back into the system, and that can damage electronics and the likes of that. So for your price of your €2,000 worth of high-tech electronics on your bike, spend an extra €2 or €3 on a relay with a diode to prevent those shocks going back up the electrical system. It's worth every penny. Now, something to watch out for when you're using a relay with a diode. These terminals, 85 and 86, you can kind of use them interchangeable on all of these relays, except for ones with diodes. So when a diode is in the circuit, 85 must be the negative terminal, and 86 must be the switch live. The polarity has got to be the right way round for the diode to work properly and to protect your circuit. So make sure you don't get 85 and 86 mixed up. Make sure 86 is always the switch live. But great resources and all this stuff, and 12-volt wiring and relays and stuff like that. Go to 12voltplanet.co.uk. It's a great website and it explains everything really well. So they have a section on the relay guide. So just to finalise with these pictures, this is what I'm doing. The two cables at the bottom there are my switched on ignition. So as soon as I switch the ignition on in this bike, that relay will get pulled in and it will power those LEDs for me. So they'll always be on when the ignition is switched on. When I turn the ignition off, the lights will switch off. And that's it. Nothing more complex than that. Right. Last picture, I promise. I forgot. I'm using a pod mod with these lights. So this is going to create a flickering effect. So my relay actually supplies power to my pod mod, and it's my pod mod that supplies power to the lights. So I've got a modulator that's going to make those lights flicker to increase my visibility, try and catch people's eyes. So that's the only minor modification to my last picture. Done. No more pictures, no more slides. And one last thing here, you'll see the negative from my pod mod goes all the way back to my battery negative terminal. That's just because this relay and pod mod were fitted above the battery box, and the negative terminal on the battery was the closest I had to ground, so it was easy enough to do it to there. So that was the final circuit in the end. So I've gone to the forums and I found out there's a switched positive under this side panel here, and there's also one up in the headlight there. So there's an alternative tap-off point I could have for my switch live, but I'm going to use the one down here because I'm going to keep my relay down here, and I'm going to run my spotlight wiring down the front of the frame, under the tank, and down under here. So let's get into that. Right, I had to take the seat off too to get rid of the side panel. So these, someone's conveniently labelled these switched live for accessories, a previous owner. So someone's taken the trouble to put that in for me, maybe the previous owner. I didn't buy this bike new, so I'm laughing. But I still don't know which is the positive and which is the negative on this, so I need to get my meter out. back to 20 volts DC on the meter. It doesn't matter which way around I put these. Nothing on the meter. Okay, now I'll switch the ignition on. Now the ignition is switched on, just in its first position. I don't need to start the engine. Okay. Straight away, yeah, I'm getting just shy of 12 volts. And it's negative 12 volts, so I know this one's actually the positive. So this cable here is my positive, and this is my negative. But I need to find out to assure that that is going to ground. So I can switch my ignition off again now. That's great. Go to continuity. There's this ground. Yep, it is here. So this cable here is my ground, and this is my switch live. Great, I know which ways to put those on my relay now. I've just pulled this back, and as I say, someone's already put this accessory connector on for me. So what I would have found under here, this is the Honda connection, and it would have had this blank on there with some rubber stoppers in there. So someone's taken this blank, put some pins in it for me, and put these two cables in. I marked it as switch live for accessories. So otherwise, had it not been done, you would have just found this blank on here, and you would have wanted to put some pins in here yourself and put a cable on there. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Look, you're only wiring very low voltage LED relays onto your bike. And if I look at my chart and I see that these relays only use 72 milliamps each, if I do my calculations, and I'll put them up on the screen now, I'm only using just over 1.7 watts of power. So I could power my LEDs directly from this output. And this is an original part of the Honda wiring loom, so it will be fused somewhere. You don't have to, but if you can get hold of your bike's wiring diagram, you can trace it back and find out where. And I can see from mine that this circuit is actually fused by a 10 amp fuse. But a 10 amp fuse is pretty chunky for something that's only drawing a small amount of power. So I could just put maybe a 1 amp fuse in series with my positive switched output here, and wire my LED lights up directly to this. And that'd be really simple, but that kind of defeats the purpose. The whole point of using the relay is to segregate off any of my own homemade wiring, if you like, from the bike system. And let's say I was doing this to get some heated vest connections or heated clothing connections here. I'd be sitting here at 5, 6, possibly 7 amps and more. You know, if I look at this Kais table here, for instance, once you start adding up all the different components, you can be drawing quite a lot of current. I wouldn't want to start drawing all of that through this connection. I definitely want to draw that through the relay instead. So although I don't strictly need a relay just for these LEDs, I would for a lot of accessories, and it's a nice thing to segregate the power anyway. Right, I've got to find somewhere for my relay to go. It's fairly tight under here, and that side cover is fairly flush to that, so I'm a bit short of space. I reckon if I really wedged it, I could, but I tell you what, I think I have a nice little space here. This is mainly empty. This is over the top of the battery. I'll fit this in here and maybe put it somewhere nicely like that. Something like that. Well protected. Lots of space to put it in here. Right, that's not my connection made now. So that's my trigger for my relay. And I'll put that under there, root a bit round here, and I'll put the relay down there. Yeah, that's about as much cable as I need. That's routed nicely, and I'll just chop a bit extra off just in case I muck up the connections and I need to chop back a bit more. So I'll chop it there, and I'll put my relay spades on. And I'm going to use a red one for my positive side of the trigger. Got to make sure these are real tight. I've made real good connections. You can make these connections and think you've got some great connections, and they're bloody awful. Now, if I remember rightly, I said the negative had to be on, or the ground had to be on 85 and the positive on 86. So keep a little packet
because you'll never, if you're my age, you'll never see the little writing on the thing. So if you keep the packet, you can read it off that. So if I hold this orientation right, facing me, this is 85. So this is going to be my negative. And so this is my positive. Here we are. Right, so that's the switch set up for my relay. So that's going to be closing these two other terminals, the 30 and the 87. These are my load. So I can test this now and make sure the relay side is working. Let's try the ignition on, and I'm holding it and I can feel, oh yeah, I can feel this relay switching in my hand. Excellent. Okay, I won't do that anymore. Start confusing the bike. So that's my relay side. So I'm going to fit that in the battery box and put a self-tapping screw or something and just put it on the side there. Just that side. So now I need to put power in the terminal from the battery. So in this instance, I'm going to fit some auxiliary lights, and they're going to be small bike viz spots, and I'm going to fit them to the engine bars on this bracket. So I'm just tightening up the Allen key a bit before I twist it round, because it's easier to get at this angle. Right, that's my LED sat in the bracket. I like to put a cable tie around them. And I have actually a fan on here because I'm in a cold workshop. I have a fan on here. I was warming up all this metal and the LED lights to make the glue, the sticky backness to this stick on this a bit better. So, but I've got a cable tie on there, and I'll leave that on there for a few hours. Make sure that really takes. I've just got to find a way to get this cable up in a nice place. And I can see a nice routing place under that tank already. Yeah, you're going down there. There we are. Got some nice black cable ties. Holding that, pushing that cable onto the back of that frame so you can't see it. Now, I'm going to have to make some sort of join. That's not going to reach all the way back to my relay, or my join where I join these two left and right hand sides. So, like my other bike, I'm going to have to make a join here. Yeah, never cut your cables till you get your final position. I had these spots down here. I thought they would be nice down here, but I'm just thinking they're a bit too close to that hot exhaust. So I've brought them up to the top of this engine bar. So I have enough slack. So always make sure you have a bit of slack in your cable, buried away under your tank or something like that. So I haven't cut my cables off or anything yet, so I had plenty of room to just move this and move some of that cable down, some cable ties. It's looking like a nice spot. Oh, no pun intended. Yeah, that wasn't funny. It wasn't funny at all. So I thought it looked nice down here. I could move it away slightly on this bottom engine bar, but I don't have as much room the other side to do that. So I want them to be reasonably symmetrical. So this is a nice spot. Okay, so that's my relocated spot there. Wiring hidden away on that frame tube with cable ties. And I'll just do the right hand side. Now, as I said before, I've got an auxiliary connection up in that headlight. And what I could do is just splice these together and power those LEDs off that auxiliary headlight. But that's only because I know these are very low draw. I'm going to switch those off that relay that I've just put at the back there. So I'm going to push this wiring back down underneath my fan because I'm in a very cold warehouse. But that was my option. That's my option to go to that headlight. Easier when you got a fairing
because actually that's what I've done with an old Triumph Daytona. I have these bullets on a Triumph Daytona just buried in the fan, in the fairing there, and I can hide all the cabling, and I've just wired it to the side lights so they come on when I put the side lights on. But these are going to be switched off my relay. Now I've brought my two sets of spots together with the wiring, and one cable's got a white stripe, one's non-white stripe. Your positive and negative. I don't know which it is actually, I need to find out. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to solder those together to keep them firm together. You don't need to, but I think it'd be good practice. If you have a soldering iron, it's good idea to solder those. I'm going to do that now. So that's them soldered. We'll just put a bit of heat shrink around them as well, just to seal the deal. Make sure I don't get this on the frame. Cool. Right, that's my fogs wired. To here. Now, I've pre-made up another piece of cable, which I'm going to run underneath that tank now. Just as soon as I've made this connection here. I need to check out what's positive and what's negative. Right, so I've finished that connection, and I've got another piece of heat shrink around the entire join. So there's my join. My two lights. I could put the other end to a battery now and just check and see if these fogs work. Spots work, not fogs, but they could be fogs. Testing. Did he wire these the right way around? Let's check it out. Yep, left and right. Super. Right, so just got to get that wiring pushed through under the tank, and then also wire in the modulator. Right, so had to take two cable ties together because I couldn't quite get a large one to reach all the way through. So I need to get this cable tie sitting in this tray here I found. And it can be a bit trial and error. Sometimes you get it first time. I just did a practice run and got it first time. Now I can't get it. No, it's gone further sideways up there, so I just need to muck around like this for a couple of minutes until I get this running where I want it to run. In fact, in here I can even actually, there's a ledge here with a foam edge on it, and I could even push it up under there, I think. I can. Oh, that was a result. Okay, so this is great. This is my cable tie up in a little tray up here, and I'll be able to pull my cabling through with that cable tie. I might have to just snip that end piece off because it's a little bit large and it'll get caught on something. Cool. There's lots of different ways of doing this, but this is my favourite one, a plastic cable tie. There we go. This is proving easy. Almost unnecessary. Yeah, look. Totally unnecessary. I can just feed that cable over the edge of a lip inside there without using that cable tie at all. But look, that mechanism there was for when you can't do that, okay? I meant to do that. I just wanted to show you that, even though I knew I could put it in there, honestly. And of course, if you're having great difficulty, you could just loosen the tank bolt. Well, it's quite easy on this one, much easier than my Triumph. And I can lift the tank 2 or 3 inches and get that cable under there as well. So some of the things I'm going to do now are a bit specific to this bike. So this sits on top of the battery. So I'm going to fit my relay like this in here. So I need a hole through there, and I'm going to run the cables down to the battery, which will be underneath it. But I mean, this is only specific because of this bike, but it's the sort of thing you might have to do with your bike, depending on how it's, where your battery is and stuff like that. Cool, so now I've got a hole big enough for the cables to go through. So now, this is my positive side and this is my power to the relay from the battery. Now you notice it's only a thin wire, and that's because I just have LEDs. If this was heated jackets and high current stuff, this would be a much heavier duty cable, but I don't need to do that in this instance. Man, right. Next day, I think I need to tidy up before I continue. So with my power from my battery, you'll notice there's no fuse in it. I thought it'd be here today. I'm waiting for an inline fuse in the post. So what I'll be doing is just snipping that wire there, put my inline fuse in here, and I'll solder the two ends and put some protection over it. So that'll be my fused main power to the relay. And I'm also using the modulator, the BikeViz modulator. So my power is actually going to be to the modulator via the red and the grey cable, and it's going to be this cable that's going to go off to the lights. So I'll do a soldered connection to those as well. So now these are coming back from my lights up at the front. That's powered or connected to the modulator, and it's the modulator that will be connected up to the relay down there. I need to extend that negative on the modulator to go back underneath that battery box. But that'll be fine. So I'll solder these connections and put some wrap around them. Okay, so I've got to put a connector. This is from my modulator. So I've got to put the connector onto the positive side into the modulator. Now it's a very, very thin wire. So what I've done is cut a fair bit back, and then I've tinned it. So I've just gone with a soldering tool and just put a layer of solder on there to just keep the wires together. I'm going to fold that over a few times just to make so I have something beefy to connect on that, because if I just try and crimp that on there, that's not going to last very long at all. See, look, I was able to fold that over now. Now that'll make a nice crimp. Right, that's my wiring finished. So my cabling up to my lights from my modulator, which is powered from the relay, which is switched from a live on ignition switch under there. I just have to connect the negative to the battery or an earth point underneath this battery box, fit it in, and I'll just tidy up the cables. I just chopped that negative terminal going back to the battery and put another connector on it with a bit of heat shrink, just to give it some firmness. Okay, so you can choose where you want all this stuff. I mean, you can see if you can squeeze it in the side panels or underneath the battery box, although there's very little room underneath there. But I found, look, because I'm using an automotive relay that's gonna, it's a tiny bit exposed, I'm gonna leave it in this box above the battery box. I have the cabling nicely cable tidied up, and I can just snip that cable tidy if I need to take the battery or get access to the battery. That's no problem. So that's that fitted. Better test them. Right, and with the supreme confidence of my master wiring skills, this is the moment of truth. I've tidied up. This is the bike's either gonna go up in flames. The lights are gonna come on, but they're not gonna modulate. The lights just go poof. Or we just see how they come out. Let's check it out. I'm feeling confident. Good sign, lights are on. Modulate. As if by magic. There we are. BikeViz modulated bullets on a Honda CB1100. That's the job. So if you're doing this, what do you need? Well, a basic toolkit really, but it does help if you have some shrink tube assortment there to clean off the connections after you've done a bit of soldering. A soldering iron definitely, and a heat gun which will shrink those wraps. These aren't expensive things. I think I got this for about €19 from a local DIY store. Obviously some crimp connections and a crimper. Lots of cable ties, different sizes. Again, go down to the pound shop, buy them for nothing, buy big bags for nothing. These were dirt cheap. The thing that'll probably take most of your time, and that's just a bit of keyboard time, is just finding out what connection you need for your switched live
and whether there's a blank one on your bike or not. And if there is, you'll need some spare pins to put in them to make up the connection. Otherwise, try and find a connection, or try and find one that's pre-wired for you on the internet. If you really don't want to do all this, there is an alternative. There is a halfway house. And if you go to Eastern Beaver, they have done exactly what I've done. And they've made up a pre-wired kit with a relay, with the option of one with a diode, and I'd say get the one with the diode every time. And for 1 or 2 circuits. And it's pre-wired up, it ships from Japan, and they have all sorts of connectors on there as well. So if you need to buy a connector, you can buy a connector. So that's a halfway house. You'll still need to do stuff like wire your lights and stuff like that. I mean, I've got my BikeViz modulated LEDs on there now, and they're working fine. And there'll still be a bit of wiring to do. If you don't want to attempt any of this, consider taking it to an auto electrician and just saying, here, look, here's my switch live, and identify it from the forum and say, here's my switch live, show him the connection, and he'll say, okay, I know what connector that is. He'll know. And tell him, look, I want a pair of lights at the front, or, I'm looking for a fused switched relay circuit. This is my trigger. And he'll be delighted. He'll know everything you're talking about. He'll be delighted to do it. And you may find their hourly rates are cheaper than a motorbike dealer. And that auto electrician is likely to have all of these type of things in stock, and you have the proper crimp tools. These type of connectors don't use this Bogo cheapo crimp tool. You can get away with it, but it's not really the right tool for the job. So you've got a few options, but what I'd say is, look, in these COVID times, none of these tools are expensive. It can be done yourself. It's all very straightforward. If you've got time, and boy, with COVID, have I got time? I would say give it a go yourself. This is the 3rd bike I've fitted these bullets to now, and I've actually fitted them in 3 different ways. So I like this way. I like this relay, and it works for any load, high load, low load. It's fused, it's safe, it's going to protect my CAN bus system. So why not? What else should you do?